Transformation, atonement, and the excitement of reinvention are frequently promised on reality television. The young men and women who were fleeing centuries of tradition in pursuit of freedom enthralled audiences when Breaking Amish originally premiered. Sabrina Burkholder was one of them. Audiences responded favorably to her candor and unvarnished vulnerability. She was not only a member of the cast, the story's emotional core was her. However, a deeper story was developing behind her reserved grin and on-screen admissions, one that was much more eerie than what the TLC cameras could record. You will cry as you read about Sabrina Burkholder's heartbreaking experience in Breaking Amish, a tale that will make you cry. It started with what appeared to be a hopeful face when Sabrina Burkholder, a young Mennonite woman, joined TLC's Breaking Amish in 2012. She entered the realm of reality television. She seemed at first to be just another cast member who dared to break through the inflexible barriers of religious tradition in order to experience a little bit of contemporary freedom. Sabrina, however, was never merely a participant. She stood out right away due to something in her presence. She possessed a fragility that is rarely depicted on TV, a rawness that increased the intensity of every emotion and gave every word an unvarnished sense. She spoke in a way that both unnerved and attracted people with equal vigor. Sabrina appeared to be completely without a mask, in contrast to many reality stars who do so for cameras. Her openness was disarming and left viewers with vivid memories. She fumbled through her journey with a trembling honesty that showed a soul bearing far more weight than the show's premise could hold, rather than with prepared words or controlled poise. This transparency generated a strong bond with the audience. However, it also exposed her. Beneath the shy chuckle and shy smile lay a tempest that would eventually almost kill her. The carefully staged drama, disagreements, tears, and reconciliations were all visible to the television viewers. The scars she took into the spotlight, however, were invisible to them, the monsters that murmured just outside the screen's borders. This is more than just a reality TV personality's story. It tells the tale of a lady who is torn between the demands of a religious upbringing, the sudden spotlight of celebrity, and the inner turmoil that plagued her long before she was on screen. The delicate boundary between survival and collapse must be revealed in order to comprehend Sabrina Burkholder. And it's hard to avoid crying when you hear about her story in its entirety. Sabrina's journey from Amish heritage to reality TV celebrity started in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where there are countless fields. There are more buggies than vehicles, and tradition is not just followed but steadfastly upheld. The Amish and Mennonite groups, which have strong roots in centuries-old ways of living, are concentrated in Lancaster. Sabrina was nurtured in this environment, surrounded by austerity and the uncompromising standards of dedication. She was raised in the Mennonite faith, which had stricter requirements than the Amish, but was still less restricted. Being humble was a commandment, not a suggestion. Obedience and discipline were essentials, not just virtues. Individuality was viewed as a danger to the social order, while conformity was praised. Such expectations may feel like chains to a child who is trying to find their individuality. Sabrina lived in a society where deviance was frowned upon, and where the need for individuality frequently ran counter to ingrained norms of silence and humility. Sabrina ventured into uncharted terrain when she joined Breaking Amish. Despite not being Amish, she was positioned with Amish cast members, making her the only Mennonite in a group that was already perceived as foreign. Her history both defined her position in the story and isolated her, making her stand out on screen. She was constantly comparing herself to her co-stars, as well as to the wider audience, who watched in awe. Because she was the outlier among outliers, every tear, every slip-up, and every confession was amplified. Joining the show was more than simply a career decision for Sabrina. It was an adventure into the unknown, an opportunity to discover freedom outside of Lancaster and the subdued conservatism of her childhood. Because her journey wasn't smooth or simple, viewers found it fascinating. She publicly struggled with identity, faith, and the pull of her heritage. She stumbled, acknowledged her shortcomings, and allowed the cameras to catch her at her weakest. She became one of the franchise's most enduring characters because of her candor. But she didn't realize how brutal the world outside Lancaster was. She was exposed, but not protected, by reality television. Her tentative self-assurance belied a young woman who was ill-equipped to handle the constant scrutiny that accompanied celebrity. She brought into that world the silent wounds of a life under stress, unresolved pain, and unsaid trauma. Soon, those scars would reappear, enlarged by reality TV's stage lights, drawing her into battles that no viewer could ever understand. The dark shadow of the spotlight. Illusion is the foundation of reality TV. It rarely provides the complete truth, but it promises notoriety, attention, and even freedom. Instead of assisting Sabrina in escaping her personal issues, the cameras exacerbated them. For millions to devour, every moment of uncertainty, error, and breakdown was exaggerated. Her life was turned into a plot point by TLC arguments, religious crises, and emotional breakdowns were all captured by the network and packaged into entertaining but unhealing episodes. These were dramatic plot elements for the audience. Sabrina saw them as actual fights that were being televised for the world to witness. The suffering behind the scenes was much worse than what the public saw. She was dealing with unbearable loneliness, unresolved trauma, and the ongoing pressure to appear weak and broken. Speculative viewers watched. Her tale was told under the direction of producers, and when the cameras stopped rolling, Sabrina was forced to face the repercussions. She was caught in yet another cycle of domination rather than gaining liberation. This time, it was the entertainment industry, not her religious background. Peace did not come from fame. It brought chains that bound her to a story over which she had no control. With every year that went by, the darkness became darker due to the pressure, expectations, the scrutiny of millions, and the never-ending cycle of exposure. Sabrina's life has turned into a play. However, her true challenges, those that would almost destroy her, were only now emerging. A great load, a young mother. Few people could quite understand how Sabrina's life was falling apart behind the bright lights of the reality TV cameras. She was more than just a character on a well-liked TLC show, or just another disturbed young lady whose errors fueled the curiosity of millions of viewers. She had a child. She had a tenuous anchor in a chaotic world for a while because of that function. However, the demands of motherhood cruelly clashed with her continuous challenges. She also lost custody of her daughter Oakley by 2015. She apparently suffered more from the anguish of that separation than from any other setback. Oakley was more than just a kid to Sabrina. Despite the volatility of her own background, she offered a chance at redemption and the potential to create something stable and pure. She had a reason to withstand the temptations that gnawed at her since she was holding her daughter. But the state judged her unfit when her unpredictable lifestyle and addiction got in the way. Her biggest hope vanished overnight, leaving behind a deafening emptiness. The custody dispute might have appeared to fans as just another dramatic story point in a show that was all about spectacle. It served as material for spectacular headlines in entertainment blogs, fan-whispered conversations, and internet debate. However, this was not episode fodder for Sabrina. It wasn't included in the show. Piece by agonizing piece, her life was being torn apart. She frequently felt invisible and like a caricature because of the stark contrast between her life and what other people saw as fun. Grief persisted in her private life long after the cameras had stopped. She wasn't just lamenting her child's passing, she was lamenting the potential stability she may have established and the prospect of being valued for more than her errors. The first of many wounds that shaped her downward spiral was that loss. Addiction takes hold. As the series progressed, Sabrina's personal struggles were revealed to the public, making them less private. Her legal troubles were becoming news stories rather than rumors. Her decline was marked by numerous parole violations, conspiracy accusations, and arrests for possession of prohibited narcotics. These painful and unvarnished moments were analyzed and reenacted as scenes in an ongoing drama rather than as the tragedies of a lady in agony. The Class A narcotic heroin, which has torn families apart, was at the heart of these issues. Heroin doesn't just make agony go away. It annihilates, devouring the soul and the body. In exchange for the promise of relief, it takes life itself. Heroin was a terrible captor to Sabrina. It left behind devastation, including missing court appearances, broken promises, and destroyed trust, as well as impaired judgment and strained relationships. Her story of addiction was not one of weakness. It was a never-ending cycle of brief recuperation followed by relapse, with each stage adding to her feelings of guilt and desperation. However, to end the explanation here would be to confuse the cause with the symptom. Rather than being the cause of Sabrina's collapse, addiction was a symptom of something more sinister. Long before she ever came into contact with drugs, it was the visible manifestation of the wounds she carried. Her drug use was more than just self-destruction or rebellion. It was a last-ditch effort to live, a means of numbing the agony she had no other means of facing. Her story might have seemed disorganized, even irresponsible, from the outside. On the inside, however, every relapse and every unsuccessful sobriety attempt was linked to agony that never went away. Sabrina was not defined by her addiction. It demonstrated her extreme lack of healing. The spiral was fueled by the trauma. The cause of Sabrina's pain eventually became apparent. It was a revelation that changed the way people perceived her. She allegedly revealed that she had experienced abuse as a child. These admissions were not made lightly. Her kind of trauma occurs in quiet, reshaping identity, influencing decisions and leaving scars that are horribly real to the victim but unseen to others. There was more than one instance of abuse that was recorded in the past. Every phase of her life was affected by the wound. Before she even knew what safety meant, it took it away from her. She lost faith in other people. Her self-esteem was damaged, and she was left constantly looking for a way out of memories that grew more intense every year. She apparently found that escape in drugs. The memories were blurred by heroin. The edges were blurred by pills. Every high served as a short-term buffer against the memories of her early suffering that followed her into adulthood. Although it appeared to be self-destruction to outsiders, it was actually survival. She was never seeking pleasure when she resorted to drugs. She wanted to be quiet. For many people, the story addiction is portrayed in straightforward terms: bad choices, a lack of self-control, and moral weakness. However, the reality of Sabrina's life was much more nuanced. Her terrible journey was not the result of innate recklessness or a desire to rebel. It originated from traumas that had never been recognized and from wounds that had never received medical attention. From a child who, before ever having the opportunity to develop into her own self, had been made to bear burdens that were too great for her. That childhood continued into her adulthood, one protracted struggle with unsaid suffering. Every slip-up and recurrence was the echo of abuse that had never been addressed in a way that permitted recovery. Sabrina was left with nothing but the techniques she knew: numbing, silencing, and enduring in the absence of adequate care and support systems capable of managing her suffering. Addiction and bad decisions were never the only aspects of her existence. It was about the repercussions of keeping quiet, the cruelty of untreated trauma, the inevitable breakdown of unhealed pasts, celebrity, and relapse. Sabrina stayed connected to reality TV even as her personal life took a nosedive. In many respects, TLC wouldn't let her go after introducing her to the public. She was bound by contracts with producers, and at one point she signed legal releases that let her parole officers and the showrunners follow her healing process. Every setback, therapeutic step, follow her healing process. Every setback, therapeutic step, and relapse wasn't just recorded for the courts, it was recorded for the cameras as well. This system appeared to be accountability on paper. Under the watchful eyes of both an audience and authority figures, she was being watched, restrained, and forced to face her behavior. However, behind it were the signs of exploitation. Her suffering, relapses, and humiliations were turned into plot points that could be consumed. Millions watched as scenes of court appearances, heartfelt admissions, and relapsing into addiction were produced, packaged, and aired. These scenes were powerful television for the producers. They were the kind of stuff that kept viewers riveted to their screens, raw, emotional, and captivating. Sabrina became a figure that viewers could discuss online. a terrible individual whose misery was always there at the touch of a button, a warning story. Every relapse, however, was more than just an episode arc or a headline for Sabrina. Each one was an intensely personal breakdown, a flashback to embarrassment and terror, and affirmation that the ghosts of her past continued to haunt her. She was never given the opportunity to break down in private because those moments were televised. The public even owned her failures. Her sense of alienation was heightened by this dual reality, living her life while also witnessing its analysis on television. She was no longer just struggling to stay sober. She was up against a business that profited from her pain. She had little space to recover and little opportunity to take back her story from the stories that others had created for her, because her suffering was both her own and everyone else's amusement. Once a gateway to opportunities, fame had turned into a trap. Every lapse was exaggerated, every error was saved, and every vulnerable moment was reenacted. Many people no longer saw Sabrina as a lady in distress. She was a sight. Additionally, the constant intrusion of cameras and public judgment made the burden of trauma, which was already severe, almost difficult to bear. The night she passed away and returned. In June 2018, just a few days before Sabrina Burkholder turned 32, the tipping point came. In a single evening, a tenuous danger of progress that had been sober for almost a year came crashing down. She was in York County, Pennsylvania, visiting a friend with her lover, Jethro Null. That night's mood was not one of usual celebration. There was an implicit risk associated with the gathering for Sabrina, whose sobriety was a daily struggle. Claiming it was a birthday present, her pal offered her heroin in a terrifying manner. What came next was a haze of bits. Something feeling off was the last thing Sabrina remembered. She couldn't place the abrupt feeling of disorientation. In a matter of minutes, her body gave up. Her heart ceased beating. The living no longer included her. In a clinical sense, she had died. The room exploded in panic. Jethro yelled for CPR to continue, his voice breaking with despair. As valuable minutes passed, their friend frantically pounded down on her chest, refusing to concede defeat. Against seemingly impossible obstacles, Narcan was administered once and then again. Her heartbeat gradually recovered. She was alive, albeit the feeble rhythm was brittle. When Sabrina's eyes opened at last, she brought back with her something that could not be explained by earthly intervention. She talked about having visions, meeting her biological grandma, and then seeing her mother, who died when Sabrina was just 6 years old. The pictures were vivid, resembling events lived outside of time rather than dreams. When she was pulled back, the crossing to the other side came to an end, and she spoke about a location that felt like heaven. Sabrina had briefly transcended life and then mysteriously re-entered it. It is impossible to overstate how serious the incident was. More than just another overdose occurred here. It was a line crossed and then reversed, a literal brush with death. For Sabrina, the encounter rocked her core identity. She hadn't only made it through a crisis driven by addiction. Somehow, she had survived her death, recuperation, and introspection. Sabrina was forced to face the consequences of the overdose. The fact that her life had changed beyond recognition was something she could no longer ignore. Years of addiction, trauma, and unrelenting cycles of relapse had buried the version of herself she once knew. The remaining illusions she had held onto were shattered by the near-death experience. Sabrina checked herself into treatment after realizing how bad her circumstances were. She consciously chose to distance herself from the spotlight, avoiding the scrutiny of reality TV and the opinions of others. It was a statement that she needed time to recover, away from cameras and the continual reminder of her public image, not a sign of weakness. The process of rehabilitation was not simple. She had to face demons that she had long shunned. Drugs have been used for years as a defense against memories that were too painful to confront. Childhood abuse and traumas so deeply ingrained that she had thought quiet might remove them were the root causes of her addiction, but her negative tendencies had only been exacerbated by the quiet, which had festered into dependence. Sabrina would come clean about this fact years later. She acknowledged that she used drugs to try to numb excruciating agony rather than to achieve euphoria. She changed the story of her life in the process. Addiction was no longer the sole defining factor in her story. It turned into a story of perseverance and survival in the face of forces that shaped her long before she ever achieved recognition. She gave voice to the innumerable others who used drugs as a frantic reaction to invisible wounds rather than out of weakness by owning up to her past. It was more than just a confession when she told the truth. It was bravery. Every syllable was a protest against stigma and shame, and declaration that naming the darkness is the first step toward healing. Recovery wasn't a straight line for Sabrina. It was not the clean narrative of relapse, atonement, and closure. Rather, it was clumsy, exhausting, and continuous. No less, she started to recover pieces of herself in the middle of it, her identity as a partner and mother, but most significantly, as a resilient woman. The heartbreaking trip that will make you cry. The tale of Sabrina Burkholder is still untold today. She keeps up her daily battle for sobriety, to mend what was damaged, and to support those who bear the unseen wounds of trauma. Her journey, however, defies the idealized story of a happily ever after. It's not a glamorous comeback. It's uncooked. It hurts. It never stops. Her life has developed into a patchwork of inconsistencies. She had to deal with the shame of breaching Amish fame in addition to her rigid Mennonite heritage. From becoming a mother to addiction spirals. The transition from a brief death to a precarious survival. Although wounded, Sabrina's narrative cannot be denied. Neither can these scars be completely removed or photographed. They are present in the quiet times of conflict, in the intimate battles waged out of sight. She would appear to the public as a reality TV personality, someone whose personal struggles were shown for entertainment purposes. However, a closer examination of her life reveals something much deeper. Sabrina's suffering was made public, rating analysis of her worst moments. But she still stands, representing a defiance that no theater or screenplay could create. Because it speaks to more than just her, her narrative has resonance. It is a reflection of innumerable invisible struggles in addition to her grief. Her story echoes every untold tale of addiction, every concealed scar of trauma, and every struggle for healing in a culture that is quick to condemn but slow to comprehend. In addition to its heartache, Sabrina's journey will make you cry because it captures the universal fight of human resiliency. She is still a woman who has experienced loss and resiliency, failure and redemption, collapse and comeback. Her present is characterized by the bravery to go on, despite the shadows of her past. This is more than just Sabrina Burkholder's story. It is the narrative of perseverance itself, of a life ripped apart and pieced back together in a patchwork fashion, of a human spirit that bears the brutal weight of history without giving up. A happy ending is not guaranteed by her adventure. Rather, it provides something more truthful, the fact that simply surviving is a success. And Sabrina has written a story that will make you cry because of that survival. It is an unwavering monument to what it means to live when everything has attempted to silence you, not only because it is a tragedy. In the wake of trauma, Sabrina Burkholder's story is one of suffering, surviving, and unwavering quest for serenity. You will cry as you read about Sabrina Burkholder's heartbreaking path from breaking Amish. In addition to being the tale of a reality TV personality, it also serves as a mirror of the struggles that many people face behind the scenes. Her journey through addiction, grief, and rehabilitation compels us to face difficult realities about resilience, exploitation, and celebrity. She continues to be a symbol of both sadness and fortitude, serving as a reminder that there are people still attempting to heal behind every news story. Do you think Sabrina's narrative is about survival or about redemption? Leave a comment with your ideas. We appreciate you viewing this video with us, and we hope to see you in the next one.